welcome to this panel discussion. We've all been looking at the videos that you have either written or given voice to or participated in the composite bringing together of these wonderful 5-minute videos. And I think what we'd all like to hear from you is it would be lovely to get to know you a little bit and what brought you to this project. And also a little bit maybe about what did you do on the project? That would be nice to know as well.
Sure. So my name is Mahi, and I was responsible for writing the fourth short film, The Soap Selling Holy Man. It was a really great experience working on this project with British councils and with Glasgow museums, and I really appreciated the opportunity to kind of flex my creative muscles, so to speak, and really show off those skills. I thought it was a great opportunity. I mean, I was always wanting kind of some way to get my fiction out there and really feel like I was connecting with a wider organization, feel like I was connecting with a wider story. And so when I heard about this opportunity, I think it was actually sent to me by one of the local organizations in Glasgow, one of the local community organizations in Glasgow. And I was sent this opportunity. I thought, yes, this really seems like, something for me. I love writing. I love the creative process, and it really feels a good way to educate other people about history, about their own heritage, and about their own culture. And I also really loved, doing research for the story as well, and really actually inhabiting the mind of the character and really trying to bring these stories back into the modern day where they're just as relevant as they were historically. So yeah, that was a bit about my kind of involvement and engagement with the process.
Thank you, Mahi. Should we go to, there's Iman. Hi, Iman. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Hi.
So I'm an actor and a performer. So I got involved. I actually got sent this numerous times because I told people that I wanted to get into acting full time, and they'd seen this opportunity and sent it my way. And I'm really grateful that they did, because this project it's been unique and unlike any other project I've worked on. And it's been so interesting to dive into our heritage and the stories that we have to tell, because there are so many that are untold. So that was really, really fun. And that's something I feel like that personally I want to do, as well as bring South Asian stories to the forefront, because in mainstream media we're often left out. So this was a fantastic project to be working on, and a fantastic opportunity that I'm really grateful that I could be a part of. And it really just went to show that, South Asians are not a monolith. There are so many stories, and we are a very varied people. I think it's South Asians now becoming too big an umbrella term, because there's just so much variety there. So yeah, I think that's everything. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, lovely. Thanks. Should we go down to Muji here on my screen? I can see Muji there.
Okay. Hi, my name is Muji. I first got into the project when my aunt kind of presented the opportunity to me. She was on like one of the panels with her kids, and like, if you look at some of the promotional material, you see my cousins. So that was quite nice. And coincidentally, at the same time, I started to get into digital media, like editing and all that other stuff. Right, so I thought, I might as well. Great opportunity. Work was cut out for me though, but I'm still grateful for the opportunity for all that was just presented to me out of the blue.
Thanks. So you were editing most of the videos, or all of the videos?
No, just my unused story. I also filmed it as well.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
No problem.
Shall we move on to Hamza? I've got Hamza on my screen. Hamza, tell us a little bit about your engagement with the project.
Hi, so I was a writer for the Muhammad Salim Twinkle Toes story, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoy writing, but I also enjoy researching, and part of my job was researching the story of that footballer and coming from India to Scotland, and I found it really inspiring because we were hearing about the sporting side of South Asians, which sometimes you don't hear a lot about, and it just made me made me realise how much South Asians have contributed. So I really enjoyed it, being part of the project.
And this was a footballer in the 1920s or 1930s, around that?
In the 1930s, around about then.
Okay, great. Thank you, Hamza. Malini, would you like to tell us about your engagement?
Hi everybody, my name is Malini. I'm a visual designer and I helped illustrate and animate the visuals you see in the project. And I initially joined this project because I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to write and research and contribute to the stories because it really pulled me in, the concept of a Alaskar, and my mother tongue is Bengali. So a lot of the documents, and even when it came to like visual design, I had to do a lot of research. But I came across a lot of things that in my own mother tongue, and it just I feel like this project has helped me discover a whole other aspect of my own heritage that I had never I had no idea that existed, to be honest. And yeah, it's been incredible to work with every one of you, and in the middle of a lockdown, the way we all came together to bring this together, even though I know like Muji and I, we know that, we wish we could have filmed all of the actors and made all of you look wonderful. But despite, our pandemic limitations, we've still managed to bring it together. And I'm glad to be a part of this. And I hope to collaborate with all of you wonderful artists in the future. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Malini. Seher, shall we? Yeah, it is Seher. Tell us a little bit about your.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So my name is Sahar, and I was a writer for this show, the films, and I heard about it because my mom follows like a whole bunch of stuff on Facebook, and she was like, "Hey, you might be good for this." I was like, "Okay, cool." And then I saw that you have to do a 2-minute video interview, and I was like, "Oh God!" But I'm really excited that I got it. I was a writer mainly, but then I was really lucky to be paired with a dancer. So then Muji was a huge help. And so I ended up like kind of helping him like direct it and stuff. So that's where my like love for art really helped. So like doing this project, it really like made me realize like that even though I was focused on one aspect, which was writing, that being a creative person or whatever means that your skills are really versatile. So suddenly you may be writing, but you find that you have some experience and you can help with directing and all this kind of stuff. So I really enjoyed that, and that was like a really nice realization to know that my skill set wasn't so limited into one role, which I hope all of you guys realize that what you learn in like art, design, filming, that you end up picking like a mix of everything, which was really enjoyable. And then plus I got to learn a lot about traditional Indian dancing from Panchami, so that was really nice because I'm trying to learn more about the arts, South Asian arts. So Panchami was like a great tutor, and then Miji was also a great co-worker as well.
So it sounds amazing that during the pandemic and the lockdowns and all of that, you were still kind of very actively engaging with each other to create these videos, whether actually meeting up or in some way exchanging your ideas. I think what I'd like to know a little bit more, I'm curious about is, what did you discover about South Asian history, South Asian migrant history to Scotland, or about your connections with any of the roles or characters that you might have developed during this project?
And like kind of the immigrant story, I was kind of told about it a lot, especially since like my grandmother was like kind of the matriarch of like some of the first coming into like Pollock Shields, which is like hugely populated with South Asians. So I only like kind of heard about the one linear journey, which was you got married and then you moved here and your husband worked and you stayed home. And then I was really lucky that I got to read like so many interviews that had been done with so many other women who had become translators, and then I got to meet, of course, Panchami. I learned her story about her family in Singapore, and then Vijay told me about his family in Kenya. So it was really nice learning that of all these different ways and reasons that people traveled. And then I got to watch the Aya story, which was like, I remember thinking, oh, I wish I got that profile because that would have been so nice to write. But it was really nice learning about all these little things that I had never really thought about before, because I feel like my perspective on South Asian history has become from just my family to suddenly this like whole web of so many stories that are connected, which was really nice.
Yeah, it goes back to something that I think Iman said, that South Asia is such a kind of generalized term, and there are just so many different arcs of history within that. And I think the one that you picked, Seher, was quite an unusually personal story as well. So it was really interesting how you brought together an arc of personal history with something that was common to a lot of newly married Asian brides coming during the 50s, 60s, and 70s to a new country. That was quite wonderful to see, actually. Thank you. Yeah, what about you, Iman? What was it like to give voice to one particular character, one particular role?
I think it was just so fascinating because it's something that South Asians, but also like just generally Western people, wouldn't have any indication of this story having happened. Because I had no idea of this piece. I didn't know that. I think as well we forget, depending on maybe your heritage and when your family came to this country, or when you came to this country, that like Sahar just said, you kind of think that that's where the story begins for South Asians, but I'd heard briefly that people had been coming and going before that, and it wasn't until this story though that I was just like, oh my gosh, actually, like travel actually between South Asians coming to the West has been happening for a very long time.
Yeah.
And just really either it's maybe not been recorded very well, or it's just not publicized that in actuality, even though there was a rush of immigration in the 60s and 70s, South Asians have been coming here long before that. And especially I think with the influence of, the British Raj and everything, people just thought, Westerners came to South Asia, but South Asians didn't come to Britain until the 1900s, which might not actually be true. The passage of travel didn't just work one way. It could have worked both ways. There's so much more research and storytelling and history being passed down that just needs to come to light a bit more, because so many of us are still so in the dark, and it feels so silly because that is our heritage, and you feel like we should know these things as much as Western people know about their history and their culture or their family kind of trees and things like that. It's just such a shame it's so lost in South Asians, unless there are people out there that know more about their heritage and their travel of their families and things. That's just something I feel like is so lost in our community. I'd love to know more about not just how my grandparents ended up here, but their parents, what they did. I just feel like it's such a lost element, and this project has been very eye-opening that our history actually predates the 60s and 70s in this country.
And remind me, which was the video that you did? Which was the character?
I did Twinkle Toes with Mohammed Salim, the footballer.
Oh, that's right. So with Hamza, who wrote the script.
So not only was this a story about a South Asian person being in Britain in the 1930s, which we never, I mean, like if you watch mainstream television or film, when you have period pieces, you rarely, if ever, see a brown person in them because they're usually about the Western population. So not only did we have this, but like Hamza mentioned, it was a South Asian in sports, which again is, even to this day, is very rare. We have so few sportsmen and sportswomen who are of South Asian heritage that are making headlines. I think the most notable one would probably be Amir Khan, the boxer, and Imran Khan, the cricketer, who's become Prime Minister of Pakistan. But beyond that, and there are lots of South Asians in sports, and it should be encouraged. It's an area that is still a wee bit, like the arts is a bit taboo, but it just goes to show that in the 30s, there's people doing stuff.
ones we know about are very contemporary, isn't it? They are almost within our parents' lifetimes, but there were people who were interested in all sorts of things even before we kind of could visualize that there could be people interested in all these
It's,
other things that they were doing.
it's almost mind-blowing a little bit to think this, but it's such an amazing thing to know.
Absolutely. And let me ask also, thanks, Iman, for your contribution. I would like to ask the others, would anyone else like to contribute to this particular discussion about what did you discover about South Asian migrant history while working on your piece?
Yeah, well, I just
For opening all those points of discussion. Go ahead, Mahi.
Yeah, no, sorry. I was just going to say I'd like to echo a lot of the points that have been made so far. In that it's very interesting, I guess, telling to discover the diversity and the variety of migrants and migrations from the Indian subcontinent into Britain. I mean, people moved here for so many different reasons, so many different, periods of time, and I really got to engage with that during my script that I wrote, the soap selling holy man, about the motivations as to what would impel somebody, to come here. And I find it almost, I suppose, a bit sad in that I think history of Asian culture is oftentimes a neglected study, a neglected sort of discipline. I mean, in the West, I think people have such a respect for history. They love preserving their historical buildings. They know about their family lineages. They can tell exactly where they come from, and they know what they did. Whereas I think the historical kind of output, in the Indian subcontinent, in South Asia, is lacking. I don't know too much about my family history. After my great grandfather or so, it's a blank space. And so I do feel perhaps there should be more of a focus on this historical lineage, more of a focus on kind of what the past means to us today and how that kind of echoes on. And perhaps, a slight tangent. This thought kind of popped into my mind when I was reading V.S. Naipaul's book, An Area of Darkness, when he was from Trinidad, but his family were Indian. And so as an adult, he traveled back to India to kind of reconnect with his roots and actually get to grips with, his grandfather's birthplace. And he was very shocked at what he had discovered there, very shocked at what he'd seen there. And he didn't really feel a connection, to the place. And I feel this sort of connection is very, well, this lack of connection, I should say, is still very pertinent and still very relevant, to many of us here in the West today. And so this project, I think, was a very good way to try and rekindle that connection and actually understand what it means to be from these areas and really understand the mindsets and the historical patterns that led us here.
That actually brings me to the next question, which I'm a storyteller, and my background was as an anthropologist and historian. So for the first 20 years of my life, I was working a lot with research and documentation and going out into the fields and gathering bits of data. And then at a certain point, I moved my attention to fiction and also traditional stories, not necessarily stories that have a historical basis or factual basis, as we call it. So I think what I'm interested in really asking each of you is, how relevant did you find creating fictional characters to getting to know about your own histories? Is that something that you find an exciting, useful way of approaching and getting to know histories of your culture, your heritage?
Or it's a very creative way of expressing the realities of life without dealing with the punches of life, I would say. So in a lot of ways, fiction does not only bring us closer to reality, but it also teaches us empathy, because it gives us that space, that creative space to put ourselves in the character's shoes. And that character is obviously, most of the times that character is based on reality. So the way of storytelling that we took for this project, where we lived. It's like in a lot of ways we passively lived through the experience of all these fictional, so-called fictional characters. But then I think it all resonated, like their stories resonated in us, because in a way we could, fiction gives us that place of empathy where we could experience this character's story.
Lovely. Yeah, yeah. And I suppose sometimes I always find that fiction allows us to say things which we wouldn't usually, or we would kind of censor because of social norms or personal situations. Yeah, it's nice to hear you say that word empathy.
It's a generalization about fiction anyway, but I love fiction because it does take you a little bit away from reality as such, and it allows you to explore places that maybe either don't exist or you kind of wish would exist, and kind of a whole new world that is just new to you and anyone else that you share it with. Because there was one thing in particular with the piece Twinkle Toes that I quite enjoyed about it, but it was still really in the back of my mind was that this, young brown man came from India to play in a predominantly white area to play football. And there was no mention at all of racism or kind of any prejudices that he faced. So it was a very light-hearted and heartwarming story. But in the back of my mind, I think maybe just because of the world that we do live in, our reality, that I kept thinking like, oh, I wonder if he did experience anything. I wonder what, thoughts were going on in other people's heads, any microaggressions and any of these things. But it was actually quite nice that it was left out, because it painted this softer version and possibly a fictional fantasy land. But I enjoyed that aspect because it is different from what our reality can sometimes be, and it was nice.
Oh, beautiful. Hamza, would you like to come in with what it was to kind of work with so much research you had done and yet to create a world that when I heard it, it just kind of made me think, oh, what joy and passion this man must have to come and to play with, people whose language he might not be speaking as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it kind of shows sport as like an international language that way. And in all my research as well, just carrying on what Iman said, there was only one really small case of racism from a newspaper, but all in all, he was really warmly welcomed by the Scottish community, and the fans loved him. And it was kind of a sad time for Celtic when he left and he went back to India. But creating that kind of story, I kind of tried to kind of think of, as someone who enjoys playing football, how I would kind of find it, or what may happen, if that kind of, if I maybe joined a club or just something like that, I guess.
Did anyone else experience that? Even while Muji, I'm thinking of like, even when you were, putting together Mayumi's story and filming it in the way you did, were you kind of, wondering if I filmed it this way or if I put it together this way, there might be a side to that story that came up which was not there in the writing, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, when I was filming it, I honestly, well, at the start, I had no idea what I was doing because I didn't, recognize a form of dancing I was like in doing it. Called Batak. I later learned, right, and from that, I learned that I couldn't do as many dramatic close-up shots as I wanted to. I had to get, as much as possible, get the hands in, the feet in, limitations in space. I made that very difficult. But essentially, what I learned from that was like, Seher wrote it in a way, and Bunchmi choreographed it in another way, where it really, really respected the history of the dancing,
Right. So it gave you a way of kind of relating not just to the stories, but the environment within which the culture might have shown itself as well. It wasn't just about the story, it was about the language of dance, it was about the choreography around it.
Yeah, it was only later when I showed one of the first drafts to my dad. He was like, he was he was born in Birmingham, but his family's like his side of the family is from Kashmir, right? And it was really weird because like I was thinking, okay, he's gonna like this one, okay. But then no, it's like as soon as I showed him it, like the first kind of shot, he was like, oh, what are you doing? You need to get the hands. Oh, yeah. And of course,
Yeah.
back and
Sorry,
forth with
so I'm
him,
just
like,
butting in, but yeah, I definitely get what Muji was saying. It was definitely like one of the hardest parts was like filming, because for Bunch of Me especially, and for me as well, because I was really lucky that Bunch of Me wanted me to stay involved. And so we had a meeting after I sent her the script, and she was like, she actually went through the dance movements with me. So she was, I would do this here, and I'd be like, okay, do you want me to change this? Do you want me to extend this? And then when Bridgie came in, it was a learning experience for me and Bridgie, I think, definitely, because that style of dance was culturally, we didn't understand, but it was really culturally important to her. So the hands and the movement of the feet were really important. There was one bit, it was like a really rough kind of ground that she had to dance on, and me and Bridgie were so worried about her feet.
oh yeah, I remember getting a broomstick from like a nearby shop to like sweep up shards of glass and bits of rock.
Yeah, because she was just like, she was like, I can't do it with my shoes on. It just doesn't feel right. And then then it kind of hit me like, this is her space. We have to
show respect to it.
Yeah, exactly. And that we can't, like, we might be worried about her, but ultimately it's her decision. And it was really nice that my writing was able to bring that out in her. It was so nice, like that creative process where I hope everyone gets to experience that one day, where they have someone who does something like this, like maybe they interpret it was just stunning to watch. And then I was like, and then reading it, because we were rehearsing so much, I ended up memorizing it, and then just watching her dance, I would just instantly hear like kind of the words in my head of what the movement represented, which was so nice.
What was beautiful was, often I've found that with migrant histories, we tend to divide it up like, oh, this comes from the west of the country. This is the language. And we kind of parcel it out over time as, generations pass by, and we think of this as history. But when I saw the Mayumi story, I was thinking, of course, Kathak as a dance evolved in the courts of the Mughals, in the courts of the Muslim rulers. There is such a lot of movement between different kind of groups that lived on the South Asian subcontinent as well, and they had common rhythms. So even though you were talking about an Ummi's story, which is from one part of South Asia, and she was doing the dance movements, which might be identified with another part. It was just like, oh yeah, there are common rhythms between these different parts. All these people came from a region. They were familiar with these elements. That was really beautiful to see. Thank you. And I'll just kind of want to ask Mahi, because Mahi, there was a lot of fiction element in your piece, the piece that you created. So would you like to tell us a little bit about that experience of fictionalizing and what that allowed you to do with your story?
You said my story, my character was, almost entirely fictional, but, grounded in lots of truths as well. So there were some things I knew about the reasons why people migrated from the subcontinent into Britain, and kind of what they faced there, and how they, I suppose, reacted to these changes and adapted to these changes. So for those who don't know, in my story, this man, he comes from Kashmir to Scotland as a man who sells shampoos and a man who sells soaps, and I knew that was quite a popular thing, that many South Asians did when they first came to Britain in the kind of Victorian era. Shampoo itself is an Indian word that was then popularized by these people who came over. But then he realized that he could become, he could attain a higher social status if he pretended to be this holy man, if he pretended to be this guru dispensing Oriental, Indian, Hindu wisdom to the masses in Scotland. And so he kind of built up this web of lies, and it was very interesting, writing about that and exploring that character. But it also has a lot of truth to it as well. And a major theme of my story was interracial relationships. So my soap selling holy man, he had a relationship with a white Scottish woman when he was in Glasgow. And I put a bit of myself in that because, I myself am in an interracial relationship. And so I added these kinds of experiences in to really ground it in truth. And, sad to say, just as my character faced a lot of negative stigma because of the interracial relationship that he had entered, I also face a lot of negative stigma for the interracial relationship that I'm in, particularly, sadly, from members of the Asian community, ironically enough. And I think what I quite liked was my story had quite an unhappy ending, really. I would kind of class it as more of a sad, wistful tale than something a bit more triumphant. I think that it's a very kind of important quality to have in lots of stories, just the idea that sometimes things aren't resolved, sometimes things, don't really work out. And I think that's where I can integrate, an element of realism, an element of practicality. And really, it doesn't really end on a high note. It really ends in kind of a whimper, kind of a damp squib. And so when listening, to the tale, you won't really know how to feel coming out of it, which I think is true of most things.
I think, thank you so much for those insights. I think it's worth kind of bringing that. It gives me a sense that it's worth bringing these insights and these processes to the studying of history. What I'd like to know from you as a kind of closing of this wonderful panel discussion is, what is the one thing you're going to take away with you from this project? Maybe in like a line or something. What is the one thing that's going to be maybe a learning or maybe a memory or that you're going to take away?
I guess for me, one of the biggest reasons I really wanted to join was that I really wanted to meet other South Asian artists and creators. Literally every other South Asian person that I know has gone into nothing bad on them or anything, but a lot of them went into like accountancy, medicine, and everything like that. And then going on that journey of choosing writing or art was just so isolating, because I couldn't really connect with anyone on that. And then suddenly having this project, I was able to connect with so many creators. I met you, Gaurie, which was oh my god. And then I met Muji, and then I met Panchami the dancer, and then I met all of you. And it's just so nice to know that there are so many other South Asian creators out there that I'm connected to now through this project. And it's really nice to know that maybe a few years in the future we might end up collaborating on something again for South Asian Month or whatever, which is so nice. And I'm really happy that we were given the agency to tell all our stories, and especially after doing some work in Kelvin Grove and seeing how those narratives are not really told. But then this is really, so I'm definitely taking this back.
Thank you. Wow. Lovely to know. Thanks. And it was great meeting all of you as well. What about you, Malini? What has been a memory or a learning that you're going to take away from this project?
I mean, apart from the fact that I found a network of amazing South Asian artists, that's again something I'm really incredibly grateful for, and I hope we can all work together in the future in person, because some of the actors, you were brilliant, but my filmmaking mind is this needs better lighting, the frame needs to be like this, but I'm behind the screen. So, but if there's one thing genuinely apart from obviously a lot of things to be grateful for, if there's one thing I would like to take away from this project, it's that if there's a will, there's a way. Like I really wanted to, like I knew illustration, but I was very new to animation. And I learned it in a week. I watched so many tutorials because like I was so adamant about it. I was like, no, this project cannot be just webcam footage. There has to be animation, even if there's 3 seconds of it. So I'm gonna learn it and I'm gonna bring my illustrations to life. So I think that kind of the way that I pushed myself and it wasn't a singular process. Like Oliver has been incredibly supportive. Muji, you rock. Like the way all of my colleagues have been super awesome. And it's just this feeling that that you're not alone and this is a collective process. Like I think I absolutely love that because sometimes since I'm an illustrator, it gets very lonely because it's mostly me and my dog. So it's nice when, a lot of people come together and we collaborate and we create something great. That's me.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was amazing, the illustrations. It kind of added a note of, these stories are still contemporary. It gave that edge to each of these stories. So amazing work. Thank you. Yeah. And I'm so glad you took that initiative because initially I hadn't envisaged the illustrations or what form they would take. And I was like, okay, so it's going to be stock photographs and stock film. And then it was great. Thank you, Malini.
If there wasn't the pandemic, like us designers would get together and just film it with better lighting, better camera quality. I know Muji was very passionate about it. He was kind of sad that we couldn't just do it for all the actors, but hopefully we're going to be able to do that in the future.
Yeah, definitely. Here's looking forward to that. Yeah, Muji, since your name has been mentioned, can I just pull you out of this little video panel of faces and ask you what has been your memory or learning that you take away?
Honestly, the memory I'm going to be taking away with this is working with limitations. Right, that's about the only thing I can take away from that. It wasn't just like the limitations of me actually doing the filming and all the space, all the hands and feet I needed to get in shot, but it was like all the timing restrictions I needed to take into consideration. And I think that's gonna, that's something that's gonna take, something that takes everyone forward when you have experience with it. But it's like for such like a short-term project, I didn't expect for it to impact me as much as it did.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, I know I didn't have to put in as much effort, but it really felt right to me to put in at least a bit more effort than what was asked.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it paid off. What do you think? Did it pay off?
Yeah, totally, absolutely. And was there a specific element, if I could ask you about, you said it just felt right to put in something. What was it that was urging you on? Was it the fact that it was a story about South Asian migration, South Asian communities? Was it about being part of a collective of other young people? Was it anything about the stories? What was it that was urging you on?
It was actually because before this project, I was actually doing a very different field of study, forensics and analytical chemistry.
Right.
But it was like that wasn't it for me. I was gonna, change everything up, gonna get into photography, videography, editing, all that stuff. And I was like, when I read Seher's scripts, I was like already envisioning it in my own head. Okay, I'm gonna do this, gonna do this. And it's like it didn't go to plan, obviously, because how much respect I had to put to Kathak. But that learning experience from the restrictions, it really took me forward when it came to editing the whole piece together. And again, like I said, it definitely paid off.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. Yeah. could I ask Hamza, Iman, or Mahi, come in when you want to give us your sense. Yeah, hi.
I think I'm just going to end up echoing sentiments already made, as just connecting with other South Asian creatives. Because as I mentioned earlier, we're still very underrepresented, etc. But it's not because we don't exist. We actually do exist. And I think now it's just going to be a case of actively finding these creatives. So this has been a great opportunity to host. These are the creatives that do exist out there, and there are many more of us. So it was a lovely opportunity to connect with people around, not even just Scotland, but around the world. So yeah, I really enjoyed that.
Thank you. Thanks, Iman. How about you, Hamza?
Yeah, I've never really worked in a creative environment like this before, where it's all about making a short video, and I've done a lot of writing, but never written a script where it would be made into a short film. So I really enjoyed, that kind of experience, knowing that what you're writing, an actor is gonna play it out. So I'll remember that, but probably just doing something that's close to my heart as well. What's a South Asian heritage, that as well.
Yeah. Hope to see many more from all of you because you have such vivid imaginations. And yeah, if we could end this discussion with Mahi, do you want to
Sure.
with anything? Yeah.
Yeah, well, what really stick with me is seeing that finished product, that final product, because I had no idea what my script would be turned into. I had no idea, how it would be performed. And so just seeing that really was wonderful. Actually seeing something you made being transformed by another creator, through their initiative and through their eyes. And, you really see how it's a collaborative process, through that. And I feel, and I hope, everyone kind of sees the same, how you see all the parts moving together, the parts that you contributed, the parts that your partner contributed, how everything comes together at the end. And then there's a big reveal when you finally get that link and you see the graphics, you see the acting, you see the music. So that's what will really, stick with me, just being involved in one part and seeing what grows out of that at the end.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming today and sharing your reflections with us. I know Oliver and I are really grateful because we were not sure where this was going to go at the beginning when we started in October, and how things would transition from working with young people to young adults, if I could say that, and whether you guys would be interested in the stories that the 8 to 11 group wanted to explore as well. So I have been really excited by this process, and it also brings to me the sense of how important it is to let younger generations explore history in the manner they want to, because it brings history alive in a very different way, and it's not histories, but a story that we're all continuing to swim in a way. So thank you so much for coming here. And yeah, we would definitely hope to, at least I would definitely hope to see you and your work in the near future, because you all really rock. That's all I can say. Thank you.